This is the Carmudgeon Show.
Part of the Haggerty Podcast Network.
My name is Jason Space Camisa. That is Derek Tam -Scott.
And in this episode, we discuss the all-new, just kidding, it's not all new. Is it all new? Corvette?
Yeah, brand new.
It's brand new, but it's not all new because there are other C8s that preceded it.
Yes, but this is just I think we're 4 days post-embargo drop, so everyone's stories will have just dropped on this car, including
the brand new
2026 Corvette ZR1, the C8 ZR1. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Viper chairs. We are not going to talk about the E90 M3 that's in the background. Shh.
Okay.
And you're going to clap, and I'm going to get my laptop out. I'll get it after the jingle.
Okay.
Did you know that this episode of the Carmudgeon Show is sponsored by Viper Industrial, the makers of the Viper chair,
which is here,
and now not.
Whoa. Whoa. Okay.
Viper has reinvented the shop chair, now attacking every other product that sucks in the shop and are making a better version. It includes chairs, stools, creepers, like you, fans, tool cart, even dollies coming this summer, which is you
I must sit on
and
creeper. That's a different kind of creeper.
Creeper and
as
a
opposed
dolly.
to a lie down creeper.
Yes.
Right. They are made in the United States out of real materials.
As opposed to fake materials.
Yes. Like metal.
Or crap materials, like plastic
crap materials.
They are no corners cut, industrial grade foam. Which is something you're very familiar with.
Care to elaborate?
No, I'm going to let the audience figure it out. Last week was an AMA. They should have asked that. All steel construction, grade 8 yellow zinc coated hardware, and 4-inch industrial grade coasters.
Coasters?
Casters.
Casters.
4-inch industrial grade coasters right there. Anyway,
it's more like I think that's 3 inches, but Jason has added an inch to his coaster size.
Up through 622. That was one of the questions that we did not read. We will be giving away a 2021 Python. Viper will be giving away a 2021 Python Green Porsche GT4 for every $5 you spend at viperindustrial.com. You'll get entered for a chance to win the GT4 plus
$15,000 in cash.
Full rules and details at viperindustrial.com, which is, of course, VYPERindustrial.com, all one word.
And if you use the code Carmudgeon, you get $50 off of your order at Viper Industrial.
And people say we're worthless. We are worth $50.
To at least one person out there.
We're worth $50 less than most. So, Derek, I have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the inside of a Turkish prison? Yes or no?
Never seen a grown... Never mind. Isn't that...
First question. Have you ever seen the inside of a Turkish prison?
I have not.
Have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Yes.
Yeah, every time you look in the mirror, I suspect, unless you're not actually
Unless
grown.
I'm wearing clothes.
Number 3, have you ever driven a Corvette ZR1?
Yes. Just one.
Were you wearing New Balance?
No.
This was actually a prop that we bought for the episode. I was wearing an Adidas sort of tracksuit and New Balance shoes because that's a Corvette thing.
Is
and
it? Is the tracksuit?
Yeah.
I thought it was jorts and New Balances.
I couldn't get them in time.
You couldn't get jorts?
How the fuck am I?
And fanny
pack? It was like
pack?
the day before.
And the Hawaiian floral print.
Not for a ZR1. ZR1s are elevated.
Elevated or...
Expensive.
Yes, but probably younger. I have to imagine the average buyer of a ZR1 is...
They're kind of expensive. I mean, the new one's $175,000. And
is that a good value given what you get in exchange?
Okay, so let me ask you...
1,000 horsepower.
1,064. Don't forget the 64 because that's
one
how many...
megabyte.
That's Beat. That's my Honda Beats rating. So
that's
it's 1,000
1
horsepower.
megabyte, isn't it?
I should have brought a Beat for the... Well, no, a 64 horsepower is not a megabyte.
No, 1,064 bytes is in a megabyte.
Yes. Yeah, but it's 1,000.
It's a mega horsepower. It's 1 mega horsepower.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Kilo horsepower?
No. Oh, sorry. It's 1,064 kilobytes in a megabyte.
Yeah. Why? Stop it. Okay. So my question to you as a non-Corvette. So you've driven one ZR1. It was
a C7.
Okay. You survived.
I did not die.
How was it? Do you remember?
It had a lot of horsepower. It It's very rear wheel drive.
755.
It didn't hang about.
What is your impression as a non-Corvette ingratiated enthusiast / expert?
What the ZR1
of what,
should be?
What does ZR1 mean?
Spicy, track-oriented, the enthusiast's pick. This is it is for he for whom too much is not enough.
He?
Yes.
Not she.
Correct.
Okay, just checking. So this was the part of the script that's always the hardest part, right? Because you have everyone else will have driven, from my understanding, a ZR1 at a press launch, and Chevy's team gave me one early on, and we were able to film an Icons on it. So if you guys haven't watched that, go on your YouTubes right now and go watch the Icons episode. I haven't seen it yet because we're recording this before it's been edited, but it will be fucking amazing. Of that, I'm certain. But the sort of the difference between a regular car review and an Icons episode is supposedly I try to take an elevated look, and I look at where does this car fit into the...
Tell us more about what you mean by elevated.
Well, answer the question rather than like...
Is it good?
You have the Doug DeMuro sort of school. I like, look, this is a key. And that's the glove box door, and that's this, and this is... It's observation. Look, this microphone says Shure on it upside down, and it's got a little thingy then. Your water bottle is knocked over, and like that kind of stuff. Observational stuff about the car. And that is not an insult to Doug or anyone else. That is very much a part of what makes YouTube sort of wonderful, is that everyone gets to have the shared experience of looking at details of cars, right? But I don't want to do that. And so when we came up with the concept of Icons, it was, let's look from the big picture view, how does this car fit in with what consumer expectations are of the brand, so this brand in its history, or the current market, or what will this mean moving forward, or where does sort of a bigger picture.
So what? It's answering the question. So what?
Yeah. And so the first question that I have to ask when doing a ZR1 script is, what does a ZR1 mean?
What does ZR1 mean? Mm-hmm.
The only ZR1 that I've spent any time researching was C4, which was the first car badged at ZR1. Mm-hmm. So C3, the ZR1 was an option code, that was available for C3, and it was a bunch of mostly off-the-shelf performance parts that were used for competition use. So a ZR1 package C3 was something that was just raced. But they made, according to GM's press release at the time, 7 of them. I don't know how many were totally made, 60-something. There's no sort of agreement. The original King of the Hill, ZR1 was referred to as King of the Hill Corvette. And it wasn't...
As opposed to the Mustang, which was available simultaneously, which was called...
King of the Road.
King of the Road.
KR, right.
Yes. GT500.
But the idea behind a ZR1 is it basically shit on everything in every metric, right? So it was the one Corvette that did everything better. Z06 has been, for the last couple generations, the track-focused one. Mm-hmm. But ZR1 should actually beat Z06 around a track, but then should be much softer. So it should be a much more tractable, usable daily driver. So it's the luxury Corvette,
really,
plus the speed Corvette, plus the handling Corvette, plus it's just do it all. And if you go back and look at road tests of the C4, it was the fastest accelerating car you could buy in America. It had the second highest top speed of any car sold in America. The only way to go faster than 175 was a Testarossa, which was...
This is 1989.
89 for a 90 model year. And it did 175 miles an hour. Had 315 rear tires. It was
40 though.
That 40 was not available for purchase in America
until 1990.
So at the time of launch, it was the fastest car you could buy. So the only thing that really shit on the ZR1 performance-wise was actually the Porsche 959, and it had done it many years earlier,
but was also not available in America.
Exactly. So
the F40 though was launched in 1987, and they were available starting in 1989. There are 1989 model year cars, not in the United States.
Right.
They're 1990.
Was it actually? What did it do 0 to 60? I don't know if it would have kept up with the Corvette.
I just know top end is like 202, 201.
Interesting. Yeah, but C4 broke the record for the most skid pad grip ever recorded. I don't know if it broke a braking distance, but it left a 911 turbo for dead around a racetrack. I mean, it was just the sort of king of the hill, right? It was a flop. in the market. Didn't do well because it didn't look any different. Yeah. So
even though it was 4 inches wider,
3 inches wider, beautifully artfully integrated flares. Effectively, I mean the rear end was widened.
But isn't
by
the
3 inches.
Fascia wider also?
Everything is.
Yeah.
So they're
it's not just flares.
It's not flare, right? They should have done flares, right?
Because then it would have been visually distinctive.
Yeah. But instead, they just widened the whole rear end and sort of cut it down the middle, widened it, so the license plates around is where you can really see the difference because it's got reverse lights on the either side of it. I think it's great looking. That engine, if you haven't watched that Revelations episode that I did on C4 ZR1, do it. The noise that thing makes, it has... So it's a Lotus design. It's not a GM engine. It's not a small block. It's called the LT5.
Many camshafts.
4 cams.
The only Corvette to have more than 1 camshaft up until that point, and until
LT6, which is the Z06's engine that from this current generation C8.
Right. So,
but 5.7 liter, 4 cam, 32 valve, and VTEC had not yet been invented. It was about to be. And Lotus's trick, which was fucking genius, to get both low end response and high rev power, was that half of the intake valves ran on one set of lobes and were used all the time. It was a sort of low lift cam. And then at some point, I think it was 3,700 RPM or something different, depended on load. It would open a set of butterfly valves that would allow air in through the second set of intake valves. And they had a very high lift cam, high lift, high duration, sort of more aggressive cam. And so it wasn't optimized for either, but it had half of the benefit of each. So when you start the car, it starts in normal power mode, and you actually have to flick a key over to high power mode. And you can drive it around on the soft cam. Basically, it runs out of breath, 4,500 RPM. I don't think it can even really make it to 5,000. It feels like a regular sort of push rod small block. And then in high power mode, it sort of blends those with 16 injectors and all the other shit, and then just pulls like a mother right to 7,000 RPM, which is nuts. But because your intake is breathing through 2 different camshafts, basically, you know when you've heard a Honda, you get and then when you've switched to the second set of cam lobes. Well, this one's active all the time, but the lobes are active all the time, but the throttles open up to those. I think the engine has a total of 11 throttles. Total. It's 3 plus 8. But it opens those throttles, and now you get this sort of VTEC changeover sound. And you have 2 intake noises happening simultaneously, and they resonate with each other, and they play with each other. And that plus this raucous, perfect American V8 soundtrack makes this one of the best sounding cross-plane V8s ever. What ruins it is that it's got a 56 mile an hour first gear, so you can't really, experience
in a 6-speed.
In a 6-speed. But done to evade the gas guzzler tax, because no Corvette had ever was ever subject to a gas guzzler tax, and they weren't about to start with the ZR1.
Who gives a shit?
It has to do everything. Remember, it's got to have trunk space. It's got to ride well. It had like adaptive dampers. I mean, it did everything. So C4.
What that tells you is that the buyers were style over substance, because they weren't willing to pay more for more substance because the style was not differentiated.
Yeah, they're Corvette weenies. Mm-hmm. I mean, they wear New Balances
and jorts.
So there was no C5 ZR1. And when it came back for C6, it was internally called the Blue Devil, and that was no crazy Lotus motor, but also 3 inches wider than a regular Corvette, supercharged small block, 636. Oh my God. I have too many numbers bouncing in my head. 600 something horsepower. Why can't I think of the number? 632, 636, whatever. Lots of horsepower. No longer the fastest accelerating car you could buy, but most skid pad grip ever recorded, shortest braking distances ever recorded, bunch of lap records. Randy Pope said one at Laguna Seca. Serious car. But an absolute pussycat at the limit. Easier to manage than a Miata. I mean, fantastic car, and made some of the best noises ever that I'd ever heard when it came out at the time. C7 ZR1 was more of the same. 755 horsepower now. Supercharger couldn't fit under the hood, so it stuck through it. The intercooler right on top. And this is where it all sort of went a little bit wrong, in that the C7's rear suspension just couldn't deal with the power. And so that car wound up being, C6 to C7 transitioned from a pussycat to a diabolical nightmare, to use Randy Pope's terms. It wanted to spin, and you had to manage everything. It's not quite as bad as I just drove one around around the track filming, and it definitely wanted to spin. It wasn't nice, but it also wasn't impossible to control. With that said, I wouldn't have wanted to try to set a lap time in that thing.
I was just going to say, it wasn't impossible to control if you were not
9.5
looking for maximum pace.
Yeah, and the way it spun was violent. It gave no notice. I got it, whew, and around. So that was sort of the end of the rear wheel drive, the front engine rear drive platform for Corvette. It went mid-engine for C8. The base C8 dual clutch mid-engine rear drive Corvette Stingray actually out-accelerated the old ZR1 to 60 miles an hour. It was now down to 2.8 just because it had grip.
Power putting down ability.
Yep. Well, power putting down plus gearing, right? So they geared it super short. It had no power interruption because it was a dual clutch. And so from there, everything has just been building. So we have Stingray, which has a 6.2 liter pushrod V8, and now you have Z06, which is the very track-oriented 5.5 liter flat plane crank V8. Which is called an LT6, and now ZR1 is LT7. And LT7, GM does not want to hear the words, this is just an LT6 with turbos on it, but it is. Except that, and the reason they don't want to say that is because these two engines were developed together as a pair. So it was developed in it from the
as opposed
very
to sequentially.
Exactly, from the very start to be both a 9,000 RPM. I guess 8,600, whatever it is. Very, very high revving, naturally aspirated variant, and then a slightly less high revving turbocharged variant. So the engine family was called Gemini 2, i.e., two-faced twins. And there are little Gemini rockets all over the engine, all over. I mean, they're embossed everywhere, including like on the piston tops. Instead of like an arrow pointing forward to the front of the motor, it's like a little Gemini rocket. Like just everywhere they could to sort of drive home that this was, a Gemini. The goal was never a specific horsepower number. Once they got close to 1,000, they said, fuck it, let's just go. And 1,064 is the final number, and that's on 93 octane pump. They don't have a final number for me, but on 91 octane pump, it's still over 1,000. And this is quite in contrast to the other American V8, the only other American production car with over 1,000 horsepower, which is the Demon 170, which needed ethanol to get to those numbers. And so my immediate impression was the world does not need a rear-wheel drive, automatic, turbocharged, computer-controlled, 1,064 horsepower fucking isolation machine. And then I drove it.
And did your conclusion change, or did it evolve? Stay the same?
Two conclusions.
Okay.
First, let me say that I hold General Motors, and I've said this many times, chassis engineers to a higher standard than most because I know what they're capable of when they're amazing. And the Alpha platform cars like the Cadillac ATS and Chevy SS, these cars were amazing in handling. And the base C8 Corvette Stingray is not. It's good, but it's not amazing. The ZR1 is amazing. ZR1 is among the best handling cars I've ever driven. And I'm not talking grip level. So there are 3 ZR1s you can get. There's the base car, and then there's the ZTK package, which is the track pack, basically. But that gives huge aero, so big, enormous spoilers, splitters, stiffer shocks, and cup tires. So this is basically the Z06's suspension with a lot of aero on the 1,064 horsepower turbo LT7. And then you can get the mid-grade car, which is all the aero, but the base suspension and base tires, which are PS4Ss. That's what I had. That's what they drove. And on a racetrack, at racetrack speeds, the thing is just fucking magnificent. It is exactly as much handling and braking as it needs to cope with 1,064 horsepower. You're going to be sideways if you ask it to be sideways. But the car doesn't want to spin. The car wants to put the power down. It wants to rotate on the way into a corner beautifully. So you sort of trail brake it in, and it feels front engine rear drive in its ability to be forgiving. Just no matter what you did, it never bites you. It is fucking magnificent. And there's great steering feel. The brakes are immediate. We did a whole 2-3 days of filming like lunatics on this thing. Never once even smelled the brakes. It's just non-issue. It's just complete non-issue. Engine cooling, which was a big problem on C7 and C6 from the supercharged motors, no problem at all. Never even got warm. Never derated, or if it did, derated so slightly that I couldn't even tell. We did 134 miles of drag races with this car. It got the same number over and over and over and over and over again, which I shouldn't say that. Got the same trap speed over and over again. Willow surface is just a terrible place to launch. And so it should be doing 9.6, 9.7, 9.8. I got one 9.8 second run, which is 0.2 of a second quicker than the Ferrari 296, making this the fastest accelerating rear drive car I've ever tested. Oh my God, the power. But yeah, so it's just from start to finish a triumph of engineering. And so on a racetrack, my thought is...
Does the experience of 1,000 horsepower, is it like sort of Veyron-esque in terms of the unstoppable feeling of it, the inexorability of it?
You don't get full power in this car. So I was about to touch on that, but you don't get power in first and second gear, full power. And it's geared fairly short. So second is over at 65. Third is over at 80 something is in my notes. Pretty quick. And you don't get power until third gear. Oh no, hold on. I think second is 74. So you don't really get full power until 80 miles an hour. And then, holy shit. I mean, it's just, you're like, wow, this is really fast. And then third gear happens and you're like, fuck me. It's just 100, 110, 120, 130. It's just pulling like a freight train. And it is incredibly loud in the car. Like that engine is incredibly loud. Possibly the loudest interior of any car we've ever filmed ever. We had a lot of problems with audio in the car.
Blowing out the...
Well, just I had to
mics.
scream. And, I had to be off throttle because if I was on throttle, and there is some stereo stuff happening in the car according to GM, but I wouldn't have known. It's well done.
And it's like engine ruckus, or is it like sort of chassis, like being inside of a kazoo? Like some of these cars are like, you feel like the noise of being inside of a carbon chassis car without a lot of insulation. You get like some motor noise, but it's also just like, it's like you're being inside of a speaker or something that's resonating.
Nothing like that. It's a nice interior. Remember, King of the Hill. It's got to do it all. So it's got to be a good cruiser. And it's got to, wow, it's suddenly very windy out. Sorry if you guys can hear the background noise. No, it's actually very civilized when you're driving normally, but get on it and my God, it's deafening, which is exactly what it should be. And that's not a criticism. That's a praise. You get a little tiny hint of turbo. You can hear it spool up. You can hear it kind of come down. It has some pretty crazy anti-lag shit going on. So they did a fully closed loop turbo control on each bank. So each bank is fully independent. There's no intake connection from side to side. And so the way the manifold works, the turbo is in the manifold. So it's basically 4 into 1, 4 into turbo. From there, it goes right into the intercooler, and the plumbing is maybe 6 inches long. That's all there is. And from the intercooler right into the intake plenum, which has 40% of the volume of the the LT6, the naturally aspirated version. So very small amount of
volume of air to accelerate, so you have minimal lag.
And then they are the largest turbochargers ever fitted to a production car. So there was a claim made. That was a claim. I could not verify that anything was even close. So as far as I will believe the claim.
How are they physically dimensioned?
76 millimeter compressors. 74, 76. Huge. But what they did do, which is really smart, is they have computer-controlled diverters, so no vacuum-controlled blow-off or any of that shit. Computer-controlled wastegates, and then a turbo speed sensor. So they can run it right up to the limit and keep it there.
Turbo tachometer.
But also they can play tricks to keep that boost in the intake side, even when you're off throttle. And when you're on track, and this is very key, when you're on a racetrack at racetrack RPMs, 5,000 to 8,000 RPM, it will hold 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds of boost while you're in braking, and you can watch it on the little gauge. And when you go
Where's
back,
that energy from?
It's recirculating it through the turbo. Through the intake. So it's bleeding some through the whole system. And it can only do it for a couple seconds at a time. But then as you're going back to throttle, it's not really the pressure that you're looking for, it's the speed. You want the turbo to continue to be spooled up. You would fool me into thinking it's naturally aspirated when you're on track. Let the revs fall below 4,000 and the difference between off boost and on boost is horrifying. I mean, it takes off. So yes, to answer your question, on a racetrack, like, wow, 1,064 horsepower car is great. On the road, different story. Like, this is the base car with the base tires, and the one the sort of
meaning 4Ss.
Meaning 4Ss. These are the ones I would choose because I prefer. I don't prefer Cup 2R tires because they break away so suddenly. This car can't even come. The last flash of the traction light is somewhere in the 90s usually. So it's spinning tire through 90 miles an hour. And through 90 miles an hour is where you live 100% of the time on the street. And it's special in that it's loud. And it's got a huge wing, and ours was yellow, and it looked outrageous, and it makes noises, and will ignite its tires at 50 miles an hour like that without you even trying. But it's also scary as hell. I did have a moment. I made it, I think, 18 minutes from leaving the racetrack to genuinely almost crashing the car. I hit a pavement marking that was wet, and I didn't know there was any rain. I didn't know anything was wet. Stability fully on, tour mode, just kind of like dawdling back to the house after filming, and it bit me. But it's 1,000 horsepower and 2-wheel drive. And what the fuck do you want? So I sort of had a very hard time writing the script because I thought the world does not need a 1,000 horsepower car.
Do you think consumers will have moments also? Do you think there's going to be a high attrition rate for these cars?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of these cars in trees, cars and coffee. Look, it's not inherently anything wrong with the car. Steering wakes up, it wants to help you correct the skid, but it all
if you know what to look for and listen for.
It happens so fast. I mean, even with stability control, you're managing quote unquote too much power. And so I had a really big hard time with this. My complaints about the car are that it's a flat plane crank V8. It doesn't sound like a Corvette. And I just think cars that have their own very clear identity are always, I like better. And this was very much a case of the whole C8. Look, Zora.
You're worried about this car being a Porsche 928 instead of a 911.
Yeah. It is a technologically better solution, but it's not what a Corvette is supposed to be. And so, I don't care that you can get better response and higher revs out of a flat plane crank V8. That's not what a Corvette engine is. And everyone right now is going down this path of flat plane crank. Mercedes is now going to make a flat plane crank V8 for their AMGs. Yeah, they just announced that.
For like regular production cars, sedans and shit?
Yep.
Really?
And it's the wrong engine. It's not that.
It's not the AMG identity.
Exactly. And every car company just keeps forgetting that acoustics are really important to...
Yeah, because you get them regardless of how close to the limit you are or how...
You get that. Well, it's the defining character. What is a car? A car is an engine with that, with some sort of cabin to coddle you, and that's all it is. And 90% of every car's identity is its engine, especially a sporty car. And so when you start fucking with that identity, it's like I'm 912. I'm sorry, it's just not a 911. It's a Beetle. That handles well. 911 is a flat.
Or 718.
Right, 718 is a perfect example of that. That Boxster was ruined when they put a flat 4 in it. And I certainly don't think that it's a bad thing for a Corvette to sound like a Ferrari. Everyone's been calling it an American Ferrari for years. But the C8 as a whole, I've not loved because while I appreciate there's a lot of great engineering in there, it lost its identity. Every previous Corvette had really heavy control weight. And the whole car seemed a little bit lazy. Like it would do everything you asked it to, but it didn't want to. And so, the clutch was heavy, the shifter was heavy, the steering was always very heavy. The engine was fairly slow to rev, again, cross-plane V8. And the whole car had this like layer of syrup on top of it and gruffness. to it. They would all, I said this in the video, they all misfired at idle, all the small blocks. You'd, sit there in the car, and that would shake the shifter every misfire and shake the car, rock the car a little bit. And even down to the starter, when the cars were new, you'd hit the start button and they were, like it barely had enough juice at the starter to do a hot crank. And I kind of like that. It was a very distinctive thing. You knew you were in a Corvette.
Character.
And this thing, other than that, it's 4 times louder than any modern Ferrari. It just sounds like a Ferrari. I'm like, okay, which sounds like a 4-cylinder, right? At the end of the day, flat plane cranks sound like 4s. And I'm a little bit disappointed by that because I just think, all right, really light controls, not compared to current Ferrari guys, even lighter. But it just sort of has this
sanitized
discount Ferrari feel to it. Great steering, better steering than the Ferrari stuff on center. But we did have a bunch of mid-engine Ferraris there because this is Icons, and I don't want to just talk about it if we show it. So we had a 296 and we had an SF90. Neither which is a perfect philosophical match for ZR1 because SF90 is the front electric motors like the E-Ray has. And the Zora is it will be the final evolution of C8, and that's the front motors from the a la E-Ray with the turbo ZR1 engine in it. So 1,200 plus whatever the fuck it is horsepower.
And 4-wheel drive.
And that's SF90. SF90 is a direct match there. And without question, the Corvette was more interesting to drive than the SF90. I mean, it sounded better. It sounded like a thing. The Ferraris no longer sound like anything. They sound like Dysons. So this is a real acoustic note. It's very loud. Very loud. Not in the way of a ZR1 or a Z06, which sounds more like a 458 did, where it's just a very clear, this is just a wall of hiss. Well, yeah, you're dealing with, and it's not it's a shh, like coming out of that exhaust because it's just so much volume. Yeah, I don't love a Corvette that doesn't feel like a Corvette, and I struggle with that.
Do you think that consumers are going to feel the same way? No. Do you think that this is an anachronistic viewpoint that is just them changing with the times, or do you think that it's going to be a problem in terms of how the market and consumers respond?
Corvette is selling well. 33,000 units last year, so twice as many Corvettes as 911s. I would argue that given that its price point is probably somewhere around half of what a 911 is, it probably should be selling 4X, not 2X. I think a lot of people are torn on this because I talked to, in writing this script, a lot of people, and 4 or 5 people just flat out said, well, see, it's not a Corvette. And I sort of just taken aback, like, why would you say that? Well, it's not. I mean, it's a mid-engine, it's a Ferrari. And I thought, okay, none of these people are C8 buyers, right? But they maybe could have been a C7 buyer. Actually, a couple of them have Corvettes, but no one seemed to like the styling of it. C6 was beautiful. C7 wasn't bad looking. And C8 just got a little bit angular, and I've never thought it was a particularly pretty car.
I agree. I mean, it's one of those cars that it feels overwrought to me. It feels like it was imagined by somebody who didn't want to pay the licensing fees for a real car on a bottle of wax. If I'm honest, that's my impression.
So the argument that I wound up making on this car was that everyone's, of course, going to say this is an American Ferrari, and I actually disagree. And the reason why is we brought along the only Lamborghini sports car you can buy right now. And the reason why is because I felt like the Revuelto was actually understated in its looks compared to the Ferrari.
You mean to the Corvette?
To the Corvette, sorry.
Yeah, because it has less aero and
it's got less
and all
shit, less angles, less
less busyness, which is weird. And normally you don't associate that with Lamborghini being sort of. And the Murcielago was the last sort of.
Look at the Y shape of the headlight on the Lamborghini and that detail on the side of the Corvette. Yeah. It's identical for all purposes. And I just kept thinking, wait a second, everyone's calling this C8 an American Ferrari, but actually it's much closer to the philosophy of a Lamborghini: loud, brash, fast, and outrageous. And then you realize sort of Temerario is coming, and Temerario is another one where another car company has given up on a this is now a 25-year run of Huracan and Gallardo
of naturally aspirated
V10s. And
now they're just converging on sameness, which is turbocharged
V8. Flat plane crank. And
it's so weird that flat planes are so pervasive, because it used to be something that was limited to the purview of Ferrari and TVR.
I mean, this is what happens when BMW was on top of the world for so long. Everyone started copying them, right? And this is just one of those things that, well, all of a sudden you have Ford does the GT350 with a flat plane crank, and then GM comes in and does theirs, and now there are Toyotas riding around the Nürburgring that sound mysteriously like they have flat plane cranks in them. It's just Mercedes is doing this, and I sit there and go, wait, no. You don't do it just because it's cool. You do it because it's appropriate for your brand. And I don't think a flat plane crank is appropriate for a Corvette acoustically. It's certainly not for a Lamborghini. You hear that Temerario? It sounds like nothing. It's like a garbage truck.
Yeah, and a naturally aspirated V10 is quite an experience.
The most musical engine configuration, I would argue. So I'm a little bit disappointed that the whole world. Am I surprised that the automotive world is doing this? No, but they're all converging on the same formula.
I mean, everybody's always copying each other. Everyone was doing that with Audi's V10s and BMW V10s in circa 2007, and then everyone was doing.
I mean, they did. I guess they all did 12s V8s at the same time.
Yeah, but it's all sort of incestuous, and at least they're internally combusted? ? I mean,
they're all hybridized. But Corvette never lost its identity before this, and I just don't.
Yeah, and that's why everyone who bought one was old.
Yeah, I guess. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. Most of the young people that I've spoken to about ZR1, I was under embargo. I couldn't tell them anything but to ask questions and who needs a 1,000 horsepower car? Corvette. But then I know people who are like, but I'd have a Stingray at $55,000 or $58,000 because they're discounting them, the base cars, which tells me they can't be selling that well. But it's a nice car. It's just a nice daily sort of thing. If you like the way it looks.
Yeah, it's like the thing that you often would recommend an Audi R8 for somebody who wanted something that wasn't a 911, that was sporting and interesting to drive on a daily basis, that didn't ask you to give up too much.
Yeah.
That's like the classic R8 or NSX use case.
It was interesting to me to get into 296 also, 296 and SF90 back to back, because 296 is a V6, obviously. It's a 120-degree V6, so it's the way it should be. But most manufacturers can't package a 120-degree V6 because they're so wide. I so much preferred it to the V8 and the SF90. I sort of had your voice in my head going, flat. However, I can't do a TTS imitation. Why, those flat plane crankshaft V8 engines don't sound lovely. I just, have your sort of distaste of flat plane crank V8s in my head and thinking, this V6 is more musical, plus more outspokenly turbocharged with all kinds of blow-off noises and crazy turbo whooshes. And the 290...
Some of my very favorite engine noises are from V6s.
You're fine being wrong, but you're not in this case. I mean,
I've not driven or been inside of a 296 yet, but I mean, things that I'm thinking about are like Lancias mostly and Ferraris.
I mean, the Dino V6 is
and Alfa Romeos.
And the Alfa's
pretty good. The Italians.
It's pretty good.
If it's an Italian V6, it's going to be good. But anyone else doing a V6?
No.
What's the best V6 that's not Italian?
Toyota. Lotus.
Oh yeah, the Lotus Evora.
Yeah, the Evora with the titanium exhaust was fucking unbelievable. Yeah. It's got to be that one. I mean, even Infinity's VQ sounded great for what it was.
Yeah.
Sounds like a VR6.
Yeah, I like VR6. That's probably the other answer. But
not a V6.
Yes, it's a straight inline.
Thank you.
Inline V6.
Let's not have this argument again. Yeah, it was interesting that I so preferred the V6, and then I could do I spent so much time in both of them that I could write a comparison test between the 296 and the ZR1, and that would be very interesting because the 296 would win. The only place where it falls so short is that fucking UX. I mean, the people who did this need to be shot. It doesn't even have a start button. It's a start area on a black piece of plastic on a steering wheel.
SF90 has this too, right?
Same
yes.
shit.
The first time I got in one of those, I was mystified.
Not violent. I thought you'd be like, I could just see the Kikatsu and the...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. stupid decision to make everything capacitive and just take all the tactile feedback of buttons out of.
What is the newest thing we can think of to possibly do in this car?
Yeah. But the interior of that car is otherwise truly fabulous. Like the 296 was like the seats are, I kept thinking of the line that I did in, I did a line when it was one of the last Ignition episodes I did on the GTC4 Lusso. And I said, I started out the episode sort of like looking up at a drone that was above me saying, I sedili della Colosseo erano più confortevole.
Erano più confortevole, yes.
Whatever, I don't speak Italian, which was the seats of the Colosseum are more comfortable than this, right?
Yes.
Which of course were made out of stone. And as soon as I got in the 296, I thought, and the SF90, both of them, I got the same thing. I'm like, Colosseo.
Yes.
Like it's fucking Colosseum seats. But there's a sense of occasion to that interior. Like there's just stitching everywhere, there's leather everywhere, black plastic everywhere. But then the driving experience is so 100% like Ferrari. The steering is so fast. The car, between the steering being so fast and the MR dampers and the way they tune it, the car feels absolutely massless. And it's the Corvette was faster than 296 and the SF90 and the Revuelto.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Revuelto's four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Sorry, faster, quicker?
Quicker through the quarter mile. But on a roll race, it pulled on everything. I mean, the electric, sort of the hybridized cars, the SF90 and both Ferraris and Lamborghini would get a little bit of a jump. But if you just sort of laid into it, Corvette was actually faster. But in terms of handling that, I think that 296 is the best handling mid-engine car I've ever driven. And then the ZR1's right behind it. But you can really say the word ZR1 and Ferrari in the same sentence. I mean,
which was probably the goal and has not historically been the case, and is a phenomenon that emerged in the last few years.
Yeah, and at $175,000 versus base, who knows what, we weren't giving pricing for the option level, but this Corvette that we had cloth seats. I mean, it was base, but so at $175K, it's a performance bargain relative to the Ferrari, which is double that.
Yeah, I mean, you used to have to spend 10 times that much to get 1,000 horsepower 20 years ago.
Yeah, with a Veyron. Yeah, which had twice the cylinders, twice the turbos, and four-wheel drive. And that's where the Veyron is very different. The Veyron is just, no matter what you do, it just explodes forward. The ZR1 doesn't sit and spin tire and try to kill you like the way a C7 does, or a Demon, which sit and spins tires and goes nowhere, literally doesn't move. Like that car's ability to just turn tire into 99.999% smoke and
noise.
The rest noise and zero forward progress was something I've never experienced before. This thing fucking hauls ass while it's spinning tires. It's just, it wants to go. So yeah, I'm very conflicted about it. It's a fantastic performance car. I would happily do a track day in one of those, to not have anything be able to catch you on the straights and the corners, but then have throttle adjustability and actually great steering and as an achievement.
Okay. So didn't hate it.
No, I didn't. I thought I was going to hate it.
It sounds like it's a bang, but not a marry. But that's a reflection of, I suppose, your philosophy on cars generally.
No clutch, no marry. I mean, that's not going to happen. I just wish that the Corvette crew. So I in the process of doing research for this before I started scripting, I saw an interview with Taj Jukter, who is now retired, but he was the chief engineer for this car. He's the one that made the mid-engine happen. And he started
opposed to 73,000 other people who worked at GM who variously tried to make the mid-engine thing happen since the 1960s.
Starting with Zora Arkus-Duntov.
Himself, yeah.
Right. And I got a little bit irritated because he started out this whole interview like, this is, a Corvette is all about the experience. Like it has to be experienced first and blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to grab him by the neck and say, well, why the fuck did you get rid of the manual then? Like it was still selling.
I mean, Porsche is very good at this, right? They have infinitesimally small pieces that they have divided the 911 into to deliver this experience to the people who want it. And the Corvette, they have lots of proliferation, but nowhere. I mean, what do you think the number of variants of 911s is versus the number of variants of Corvettes?
Well, it's typically towards the end of the run, 23 to 25 different models of 911.
Yeah. And there are like 3 or 4 or 5 of them that are like manual, like 911s for people like us, and then the rest are for.
Well, there's 21 to 25 different variants, and I don't think that counts transmission choices. So I think you can probably almost double that. Corvette is much simpler. You have Stingray, E-Ray, a Z06, ZR1, and they'll be Zora.
So it would behoove them potentially to sort of carve out little bits and pieces if they can do it from a manufacturability standpoint to appeal to those enthusiasts who would say, I would have the manual, small block, naturally aspirated with a good chassis and few creature comforts, for example.
Yeah.
That would play well.
I mean, I wonder if I'm sort of encouraged by the fact that Ferrari just said that they are now considering manuals again.
About GD time, because you can see how much it prints money for every variant of Ferrari that was available with both transmissions. The manual variant is worth 2 or 3 times, literally, the price of the 2-pedal variant.
Yeah, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in premiums for cars.
Right. 200, instead of 100, it's 300.
Right.
$1,000.
And so they had better
an
be paying
F430.
attention. And so they're, of course, Ferrari doesn't want to ever admit that they were wrong. And they're dipping their toe into this. They're like, well, for some low volume, like really special cars, we'll consider it. And what they're doing is I guarantee you, they're dipping their toe in and getting a temperature check, right? They're waiting to see
How does the freaking shouting of people,
are those the customers? That's the question you always have to ask. I don't want to ask that question, but
somebody's willing to pay $300,000 or $350,000 for an F430 stick versus $100,000 for an F1. That's the price point. Certainly, those are the types of people.
But are those people are now going to buy a 296?
I mean, they would if it was available in a manual potentially. I'm sure that there are, and they certainly have enough data. I should add, Ferrari has incredible data about their buyers and what cars they have, because that's how you get your sort of allocations. And so they should have incredibly high fidelity data about the consumers and what other cars they own.
I think, to me, it's a no-brainer. All you have to do is look at GT3.
Yes, correct. The take rate and the value difference.
And by the way, last gen C7 Corvette was still over 25% manual, and that was an old man sled. Mm-hmm. So if, there's nothing. I mean, Volkswagen just killed the GTI manual, and that was 50% take rate. So, I mean, there are car companies that have done stupider things, but I don't think it was the right move to get rid of a manual in a Corvette. It's my hope that so they just unveiled a new interior that doesn't have the ZR1 that I was driving was a model year 2025, and I don't know what the production cars will be because this was a prototype or like a pre-production unit. So I wonder if all of them will be model year 26, which has this new dashboard that doesn't have the waterfall of buttons. And I looked at it and thought, I wonder if they could fit a manual over there. And I doubt very much it's happening yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if they at least considered a manual for the next generation of C8s. Why would you not do something that would increase your sales by 25 or, to our point, probably more like 30, 40, 50%? Like, I just think it's unconscionable not to do it. It's dumb for Ferrari to not.
It is irresponsible for shareholder value for a company, for a publicly held company such as Ferrari.
Right.
Or
when
General
you look
Motors.
at the prices of old cars and then also look at the demand for new cars, right? Mm-hmm. We still have, and the only examples that we can have are really the sort of T50 era, like sort of T50 realm cars, or T33, and then GT3. But Porsche is the one that's really keeping it alive, the manual alive. And you look at their sales numbers, you think more than half of these cars are manual. Well,
especially in the U.S. market, which is where
the money is.
And it's also where Corvette dominates.
Yeah. I would kill to have, again, not my kind of car. I don't love the looks of it, although the proportions are remarkably similar to the 308 GT4. It's bizarre. And I think I made an Instagram post about this
about the amount of space behind the door.
Well, what I did was I just put them in the same spot and superimposed them on top of each other. And if you look at where the seats and steering wheel are and then just overlay the cars on top of them, they're the same proportions. And they're both bizarre looking, frankly.
Yes, there's a little bit too much wheelbase.
Yeah. And in the 308's corner, there was all that's where the back seat is. In the Corvette, the engine is longitudinal. So you have no choice. But yeah,
I would every other mid-engine car is longitudinal also, and they don't have those proportions.
I mean, they make up for it elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing is interesting, though. I mean, it's one of those things like I'm reviewing a car that I really don't care that much about. I was sort of on a personal basis, that, journalistically, like, is this car important? Yes, but I would have rather waited for Zora. Sure. And then just look back at C8 as a whole and say, all right, now we have a completed chapter of one generation of Corvette, the 8th generation of the Corvette. And we can say, well, C1 was its own thing and it was not fully developed. It did not have a V8. It was just it was a very different car, right?
It was available with a V8 starting in 1955.
Right. But initially it was a straight 6. It just wasn't.
It was passenger car components repackaged to bring a Motorama concept to life.
Right.
Is basically the C1 premise.
C1. C2 is the birth of the Corvette philosophy through and through, I think, right? So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are very much of a lineage. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to wait for Zora to come back and look through at C8 and say, all right, now that this chapter is complete, where do we fit in? What do we feel? How did this work? Did it work? What did they fuck up? What did they didn't? And it just, given an opportunity like to do an icons on a ZR1, I wasn't going to say no.
I also think that the C8 is the culmination of a dream that Zora, had from the beginning, more or less, right? He was most interested in dynamics and at whatever cost. And mid-engine was sort of the hottest, newest thing for good reason because it was being used in race cars. And had he been allowed and had it made commercial sense and had they not been so beholden to the sort of production volumes that GM was demanding, they would have done it. Mm-hmm. And so on the other side of the sort of like, this is not what a Corvette is, maybe the Corvette shouldn't have been that, but it sort of was obliged to do that because they were given a relatively short leash, like developing the IRS, the independent rear suspension in the C2 was like a huge coup for Duntov because he was able to get it done cheaply enough that the bean counters allowed him to put it in the car. Because well, you're going to make this small of a volume of cars, you're going to develop a unique rear suspension design that's specific to this car, which is only being sold in 30, 40, 50,000 units a year instead of, the millions that we're thinking about. Because that was why where the original Corvette concept came from was you're going to take passenger car shit. And like that's why it was originally automatic only with inline 6 because they couldn't get the column shift to function in the package of space that the Corvette insisted in for it to look the way it did. And so they said, we'll just make it a 2-speed automatic with an inline 6. Like that was where the Corvette started. And
that's why I say that the formula hadn't quite gelled yet.
Correct. I mean, they were just basically trying to make something that looked like what they put on the show circuit and spend as little money making it as possible, which is also why it was fiberglass, which had all these terrible quality control issues. And so the whole thing was just sort of this, and it was not a proper sports car. I mean, if you competed a C1 against a Jag XK or anything that was an actual sports car, like it was just totally blow it out of the water. But they made decisions like these in order to just get the thing into production, and they didn't know much about sports cars, and it was Zora's presence that really did that turned the Corvette into something halfway sporting,
right? Which
took the entire first generation.
Right, but it worked. It was a formula that worked for a long time. Although they almost killed it after C4, they almost killed it after C3. I mean, the Corvette it's not been
on life support.
Yeah, it's not a raging success story. What it is a huge image maker for GM, and I think companies often forget that image makers' halos are really important.
Yeah,
even if they're not penciling out.
They almost killed it at the beginning. Also, I think they almost killed it after the third model year because the Ford Thunderbird came out in 1955 and just outsold. They sold 701 C1s in model year. I think it was 55, which was the first year you could get a V8 in it.
700,000 Corvettes.
700.
So okay, I thought
700 Corvettes
okay.
Against I think it was 16,000 Thunderbirds in 1955, and so GM was like, I think we're going to go home now. And the part of the issue was that Chevrolet of all the GM brands was this sort of cheap and cheerful budget choice, and so why would you put a sports car, whatever the hell that is, to Americans because they're like, I don't know what the sports car is. It's, the last real sports car before the Corvette, which wasn't even a real sports car when it came out, was the Stutz Bearcat of 1913 or something like that. Like literally,
you owned 3.
Yeah. Of course, obviously, it's the best American sports car ever made. That may actually be true. In any case, so Americans didn't know what a sports car was, and they were selling them in the budget car company, and so they'd what Chevrolet buyer is going to say, I'm going to spend all this money for this thing that I don't know what it is. It was just a disaster from a I mean, they didn't properly treat it as its own product. They said, you guys can throw this together with whatever you find left on the floor after regular cars have been produced and try and make a sports car out of it, and with predictably poor results. I mean, the thing didn't have wind-up windows. Like, it had side curtains. Like, Americans didn't want all of that stuff, and certainly not at that price point. The Thunderbird was much more closely aligned with what they wanted, which was basically something that functioned the same way as a regular car, but looked cool. So
C2 fixed that.
C2 fixed that. That was a real car.
Right.
Real car from a sporting perspective that was designed in a holistic, comprehensive
way.
way.
And for whatever reason, Corvette is enough. It's just as strong of a brand in my mind as Chevrolet is. Right? It doesn't
now.
Right? You don't need to say Chevrolet Corvette. It's a Corvette.
Yes,
it's its own brand.
And that is the result of probably stuff that happened in the 1960s and continues on to this day. But when it first came out, nobody.
It was C3 that almost died. C3 almost killed. So C4 almost never happened. And this is now dating back to my research from the ZR1 episode. They were going to kill it off because the sales were poor, and they were losing money.
Maybe it's because they had been making the same car since 1968, and it got strangled to death by the emissions. But
what they wound up doing is, I think they wound up tripling the price of the car. It was some ridiculous increase in price. In fact, I think it was 1980 or 81 they raised the price of the MSRP 4 times in 1 year.
I mean, a lot of people did because of inflation.
But it was, they just accept, well, there's a great book on C4 by Mike McClelland, who was the chief engineer. And he was saying, like, listen, they were saying this doesn't pencil out. And said, well, raise the price. And, well, no one will buy it then. We'll just raise the price and find out. And more people bought it. And they raised it again, and more people bought it. And raised it again, and more people bought it.
Incredible elasticity.
Right. And then what I think that showed was that the Corvette brand was stronger than the Chevrolet brand that they were thinking it was part of. And so, you can't have an $80,000 Chevrolet, but you can certainly have an $80,000 Corvette. And this is my problem, is that the Corvette brand itself is so strong that I don't know if I'd be willing to fuck with it. And they didn't ruin it. Again, it's a fantastic car. It's just not what I necessarily think of.
Yeah, but my question is, what if what you think of as a Corvette is actually just the result of them never being able to build the car they actually wanted over all these decades?
Porsche would say the same thing about the 911, right?
Yeah, but they went down one little like sort of dead end family tree, and then they're like, oh, JK, and then they stopped.
They didn't. An American did, right? So you're talking about.
You're talking about the 928.
I'm talking about 928. Exactly.
Yeah, but it was an American who undid it.
Exactly. Yes. So this was. I think it's a very similar situation, which is that a company will sort of fail to understand what it is that the market so appreciates about their car, and say, we're going to make a better technological solution. 928 was a better technological solution for the idea of a GT than any 911 ever had been or ever could be. And it was a complete failure. And everyone involved in that decision should have been shot. Possibly. No. I mean, how do you take what was already an icon? It was an iconic car at that point, and say, we're going to throw out everything because we have a bunch of goals here that we can do better.
I think the idea that a car is an icon is a relatively recent creation. And Porsche did not get to make an icon simply by saying we're going to make an icon. They just said, we're going to keep making the best car that we know how to do. And they kept doing that over and over. And the 928 was that. And then they realized that
the 928 wasn't that, though. What they did was they said, we're going to take 928 was a better car, right? In theory, but it wasn't, they forgot all of the things that made their car special, right? There are so many examples of this.
They forgot all the things that made Porsche buyers have such strong affinity for their brand.
Exactly.
Yes.
And this is this. I really do feel like the C8 is the 928 moment for Porsche. It's not for Corvette. It's nowhere near as egregious, right? And 928 would have killed Porsche. There would be no Porsche today if they hadn't continued producing the 911.
Yes, if they hadn't continued.
But 928 doesn't feel like a Porsche. You have more time in them than I do. It's a big, fat, heavy front engine V8, lazy V8 GT that handles well. It does everything well. It's a nice car, but it doesn't feel like a Porsche.
I mean, this is exactly what Jaguar did at exactly the same time with the XJS, and you see how they ended up, except for Jaguar didn't retrench and return to making something that was conceptually aligned with what they had made before, right? If they had done that immediately, and the thing is, with the 928 and 911 were always produced contemporaneously, simultaneously. Right. There was never a time where you couldn't buy a 911 when you could also buy the 928, which is not what Jaguar did.
Well, was that on purpose? I think that was just a...
No, I mean, they put the old one, they took the old one out back and shot it because it was 15 years old.
Jaguar did. Porsche did, but Porsche was about to kill the 911, hadn't. I would say where C8 saving grace is that the Stingray is a small block and still sounds like a Corvette. Doesn't really feel like a Corvette, but it's 2/3 of the way there, and that's enough. This is, again, very much, I can't stress this enough, my personal feeling on what I like about Corvettes. But we had a C4, a C6, a C7, and a C8 there. And it was, 4 cars with ZR1 badges. And the Sesame Street music is playing. One of these things is not like the other. And it's better, but it's also just different. And I'm not sure that any one of us wanted to leave and go home and own a C8, but we kind of all fell in love with the C6s. Everyone was touching themselves inappropriately over the C4 because it was purple. It was stunning. It was so beautiful. And then the C6 and C7s were both white, just kind of nondescript color-wise. But the C6 is just sitting there looking like a Ferrari 550 or 575, just absolutely stunningly beautiful. And then the noises that come out of those two things are just like...
The definition of
American sports car. And if there's one complaint I have about that ZR1 is I want...
It doesn't feel American enough.
Until you hit the gas. I mean, it's so fucking loud in the car that like no one would ever do this. It was louder than the Revuelto, and the Revuelto had no cats and no mufflers. Outside, the Revuelto was 4 times louder than everything else. But in the car, you're like, oh, wow, this is making a lot of noise. Louder than the Corvette. It was great. It's awesome. That I loved about it a lot. But it was it was a roller coaster ride for me because I drove it at GM's Milford Proving Grounds. So they drove it in the Proving Ground. They only let me drive it in a straight line. And I left there going, uh-oh. And I tried to kill the episode because I thought, I don't want to be the guy that's like, they made a 1,064 horsepower car that's boring. So I struggled for like 3 weeks with the script and just hated every minute of it. And I was like, okay, I was able to figure out the whole Lamborghini sort of angle to it. And then getting it on track, it redeemed itself right away. I mean, the car is just magic in the corners.
Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah, really a hell of a, and they've already set 5 track records, lap records in the car. There's no doubt that it would do it. I mean, to watch this thing, we had one drag race we did where it was Revuelto, SF90, and then I was in the middle in the Corvette. And the SF90 was just having the hardest time with the launches. And it's 4-wheel drive. Just could not. It would spin up the rears, cut power, shift, spin them up again, cut power again. It just kept getting confused and it never learned, unlike the 296 when I did a drag race episode there. That just got faster until it sustained 10-second runs. That thing was just not feeling it. And the Revuelto would mostly launch better than the ZR1. And one time I got a perfect launch out of the ZR1. And so the Revuelto only pulled about a half a car length, maybe 3/4 of a car length in front of me. And again, no mufflers, no cats. It was so loud that inside the Corvette, I could hear every combustion event coming out of the back of that car. And to listen to a 9,500 RPM Lamborghini V12 go through gear after gear after gear after gear, stuck right there with me just reeling it in slowly, was one of, I don't care about drag racing, I don't care about automatic anything, I don't care about supercars. That was a fucking experience. Like to just reel in something making that noise was unbelievable. So,
well, thank God Lamborghini's at least kept the formula for the big car.
Yeah. Well, look, they're keeping the formula-ish for the smaller car. I mean,
yeah, but it's not naturally aspirated, and it's 8 cylinders.
Yeah, and it sounds. I mean, what I was told by the minder for the Revuelto is that before they put the exhaust on it sounded like shit, and that's just they're like it's just. I don't know if it's particulate filters or just drive-by, whatever it is. It sounded like nothing. The SF90 sounded like nothing. 296 doesn't sound like all that much outside. Sounds amazing in the car, not all that much. But America, fuck yeah, for the win on that. The Corvette was pretty cool. So fun episode to do. It's fun to look back. You and I can do another episode on, there was a 348 there. And the 348 has been on my shopping list for.
Really?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Huh.
It's beautiful. I thought, okay, well, it's longitudinal, so it's got equal length exhausts, and it's got the same sort of sweet sound that a 355 does. That, you know,
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'm not going to buy one, I don't think. But, or I'll put it this way, I'm not going to sell my 308 GT4 to buy one, but we can talk more about the most unloved Ferrari.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah. But we'll have to do that when we come back, because I think we're going to take a break.
Oh, no.
I'm not breaking up with you.
The Carmudgeon show, one of its famous hiatuses.
Yeah, I think timing wise, when we're looking at the calendar, we are going to have to take possibly a couple weeks down. Think of it as a summer holiday. Where's the cameras? Over there. Think of summer off. You guys are out driving your own cars. You don't need to listen to us.
Okay, well, we won't see you next week, but we will see you
not.
probably some other time.
Happy trails. See you. Hold on. What's that song? See you in September? We should just sing the See You in September song.
Nope. We're ending the episode here.
He's no fun. That was it. That was it.